Welcome to Tammy and Friends. I am so glad you're with me today because who I'm going to introduce you to today is a wonderful friend of mine that I recently shared the stage with for Salem Media in Columbus, Ohio. Jennifer Jackson comes to us as oh my goodness, this woman is a writer. She's a speaker. You can hear her on the radio. Let me just tell you, she does a whole lot of stuff, and she's also a pastor's wife. But with all of that combined, what we are going to talk about today is forgiveness, especially right here during the holidays, because it can be a tough time, as you all well know. And if we are going to have peace on earth and goodwill to all men, then we got to figure out how to do a few things differently. Hello, Jennifer. I'm glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Tammy. It's always so much fun to be together. I really enjoy your company.
You know, being with you and sitting in your studio was, we just rolled off and we just talked. And that's what I love so much about you, from that little coffee shop where I got those beautiful little scones and everything else, to just visiting with you and speaking on stage with you. When it comes to women's ministry, and we're both involved in that, one of the things that we so often have to deal with is women who have not healed from things that have happened to them. And a lot of times when it comes to forgiveness, that's a tough one. Jennifer, give me your thoughts on forgiveness during the holiday season.
Well, God challenges us and encourages us to forgive. It is vertical, just like the cross, and horizontal, just like the cross. And I think we have to start with the vertical and know that we can receive forgiveness, receive love from God. And that's where we begin. And then we extend it to others. Once we realize we are forgiven, that He covered everything on that cross, then we can begin to have the courage to unravel the layers of the people that we need to forgive. And especially at the holidays, you're going to see people that push your buttons, or maybe someone that hurt you deeply, or maybe everyone in your family is wonderful and great, but it is a principle. We all need to learn how to forgive. It's really a choice that we have to make, and the feelings will follow in time.
I love that. The feelings will follow. And most importantly, you said in time. And that is true. But it has to be that decision that we make. Because so often what women want to do during the holidays is they really want to stay home in their robe, watch a movie, have a good cup of hot chocolate or coffee, and just not even try to meet the expectations of the holiday season. And then what they do is they feel completely guilty for a negative attitude. And everything just seems to snowball from there. If somehow they can deal with a situation that happened, a person who offended them, something that made it to where they don't look forward to the holidays, then hopefully, Jennifer, I firmly believe that the impossible is possible with God. And I know that He can do that very thing. Can you just talk about this kind of thing and what you see in your ministry?
Well, you think about the holidays and the hustle and bustle, and you're in the line at the grocery store. If someone stepped on your foot, you might go home and tell your husband, "You won't believe what this lady did in this long line. She stepped on my foot." But you're over it the next day. What we're talking about today is deeper forgiveness. And the first thing that you have to do is to recognize the hurt and the hate. And you say, "Oh, wow, Jennifer, that's such a strong word." But until you acknowledge the significance of the depth of the hurt, and it might have even produced a hate in your life, you bypass the possibility of forgiveness, because we have to forgive those who are closest to us, because they're the ones that have the power to hurt us the most. It's your husband, it's your family, it's your mother, your grandparents, maybe an uncle, a best friend. Those are the ones that sometimes hurt us the most. And so you have to begin to acknowledge exactly what happened and just to be honest with God and say, God, this is what really happened, and this is how it made me feel. And I love that stage, because you can tell God anything. And whether you do that in writing in a journal, or to a trusted Christian counselor, or to a close best friend that's a Christian, you just begin by saying, I can't believe they did this. I can't believe this happened to me. And it still hurts so much. And you describe it. You have to actually describe how much it hurt you. And if you don't go deep in that stage, then you're just saying, oh, I forgive him, I let it go, but it might still be festering deep inside you.
That's exactly right. And it's not just about forgiving the name of the person. It's also naming all of the emotions and all the feelings that you went through because of what happened. Just recently, I actually was at a funeral, and there was, oh my goodness, there were so many people that were mad at each other. There were siblings that had not spoken for years. There was parents who had not spoken to children for months. And the person who had died was angry at so many people who came to their funeral. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I recognized was that unforgiveness seemed to be a road through every single bit of this. And it was very sad, because if we are an unforgiving person, what happens is people will run from us. They're not running to us.
Well, we have to acknowledge the significance of the cross, because it's the cross that makes forgiveness legally and morally right. And that's the reason we want to begin with receiving that forgiveness from God, so we can extend it. Unforgiveness says, I'm just going to surrender to fate, and whatever happens is going to happen in these relationships. But forgiveness says, no, I'm going to surrender to God and to his plan. Unforgiveness says, I just can't do it. But forgiveness says, I can't do it, but God can do it. And if God asks me to do it, then he'll help me to do it. And as we begin to make that list of the ways we were hurt, and sometimes it's even illogical, it doesn't make sense, that's okay, because you're just telling the Lord. And so you can tell him, they made me feel this way, and maybe they didn't even mean it, but you felt that way anyhow. Tell the Lord, because when we hold on to bitterness, it's really poison. It is poison in our life and poison in our body. It actually can physically negatively affect your body. So unforgiveness says, oh, this is a waste of time. But really, forgiveness, it's redemption, it's restoration. And forgiveness is separate from boundaries. So we're having the forgiveness conversation right now. Maybe we want to talk about boundaries in a few minutes, but right now we're talking about just totally forgiving.
I do want to get to boundaries, because I love that, because that becomes a solution. That becomes a way that God can guide us into a direction to where we can live free. Because when we are so in bondage to unforgiveness, we are bound up and we are not living free. I have talked with many people who, now some can just, in a heartbeat, they can tell you exactly why and what this person did. And then sometimes, girl, it happened so long ago that they've actually forgotten what the offense was. And we think to ourselves, well, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. However, that's exactly what the enemy wants us to do. He roams around like a lion looking for someone to devour. And often I say, don't feed him, because he's also like a buzzard, and he will tear us apart, one painful piece at a time. That's his style.
Well, one of the myths is that forgiveness is forgetting. But that's forgiveness right. Isn't forget. Only God can forget. And God, he doesn't even truly forget, because in all of his sovereignty, he knows everything. But he chooses to throw our sins in the sea of forgetfulness. And so actually, when we forgive over time, those feelings might diminish, but you can't. It doesn't mean it's forgetting. We do still remember what happened. It just means we're not going to hold that offense against the person.
It doesn't say that they had the right to do what they did. What it says is that we're not going to give them the right to ruin the rest of our life.
Yes.
And
Well, actually, it may have made God just as mad as it made you.
oh, that's so good.
Holy God.
Oh, that is so good right there. Because so many people will say to me, how could God allow that to happen? Can you expound on that for just a second?
Well, God doesn't want us all walking around as robots with everybody saying, we just have to follow God. No, he gives us free will. He gives us choices. He shows us right and wrong, and we get to pick. We get to pick how we treat one another. We get to pick how we live our lives. And God doesn't dictate all of that to us. Now, he doesn't say there aren't consequences. And sometimes you can let someone off of your hook. That doesn't mean they're off of God's hook. And he's holy. And he gets just as mad when someone harms one of his kids. He loves you so much.
I love that. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. But what I see so often, and even in my own life where I had times where I had to struggle with unforgiveness, is that I wanted to get them back. I wanted them to feel or see how they made me feel. I wanted it to all of a sudden a bright light to go off and say, oh my gosh, that's how I made her feel. I got to go apologize. I've got to go. And that's most of the time not how it happens. So I will so often say, for every mess, we have a Messiah. And I think that that's the reason why that he is named one of many names, Messiah. I want to talk about boundaries right here because we've got about 10 more minutes, and I want people to not just listen to what unforgiveness feels like or what forgiveness looks like. I want them to understand how to do it.
Mm-hmm. I don't think that you have to reinvite that wound again and again and again. So it depends on the situation, and it depends on what you're forgiving. If the other person has truly changed and they have truly repented, I believe you can rebuild a friendship and a relationship. It's possible as two people work toward God and they work in that triangle toward the Lord. Yes, reconciliation is sometimes a fruit of repentance, of forgiveness. But many times we have to have a boundary because that incident could happen again and again. And that's where it's so painful, is to have the discernment and the wisdom to know, okay, can I reopen that relationship, or do I need to let it just be still for right now and let God do the work? And you can talk to God about all these questions and all these decisions and invite him into that process.
And don't you think that at some point, I think that so often people will listen to the shouting of the enemy instead of the whisper of the Lord. Because the enemy is going to shout when that person is around you, everything that they ever did to hurt you. And God is going to whisper in your ear that, let me take care of this. You just find the area. To me, I think this is what it's like. I think he reminds us of the areas that we are alike with this person, not the areas that we are so drastically different with. And also we have to, now tell me if you think this is right or wrong. I think sometimes we have to drop our expectations of what we think the person should do.
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes we're expecting this fairy tale dream that's not realistic, and that's not fair to put that expectation upon them. Forgiveness is really, it's a crisis of our will. It's a decision that we make. It's a choice that we make. And sometimes we might say, I'm going to have compassion, and I'm going to try to understand the person that I'm forgiving, because I thought they were going to be this dreamy fairy tale, unrealistic figure in my life. And that's not who they are. They may not even have the skills, the ability, or the finances, or the provision, or anything to be what I thought they were supposed to be for me. Only God can fill those shoes. And so sometimes I have to say, Lord, help me see them the way you do. Lord, help me to have compassion on them. Why are they the way they are? And it's probably because they've been hurt just as much.
Oftentimes it is. And we've always heard that hurt people hurt other people. And
Yes.
that's very true. But when it comes to forgiving someone, and if you want to have that holly jolly family gathering this year, you don't have to tell the person that you forgive them. You don't even have to do that conversation with them. You can actually have that conversation with yourself, and you can shrug off that heavy cloak that says, oh, you have to go to that person and you have to tell them that you forgive them for what they did to you. I have found that so often when we do that kind of thing, it can actually blow up in our face. And then, oh my goodness, we have other things we've got to deal with. So I think that forgiveness is a conscious decision that you make, and you make it between you and the Lord, and you just let the Lord take care of all the details, but you decide that from this day forward, you're going to forgive that person, and you're going to live life differently. You're going to be better instead of bitter, because bitter is no place to be. And I know sometimes whenever we taste something bitter, I mean, we have a face to it. We just want to spit and everything else. A bitter person also has a face, a certain face that goes along with everything that they say. It's just like they want to spit the words out. And I know that nobody listening wants to be that person. But at some point, if we're dealing with unforgiveness issues, we have to step off the fast track that is taking us there. And we have to step into forgiveness, which will get us where we want to be this holiday season. So,
well, I expect that forgiveness will result in a change in your life. You're going to feel the difference. You're going to feel freer. You're going to feel lighter. You know, when Jesus was on the cross, he looked down and said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You know, they don't know. Many times they don't know how much it's hurt you, but you can tell it to the Lord, because it is going to result in a new freedom in your life.
and Jennifer, you can actually see in the way somebody talks, the way they walk, the way they look at other people, how loudly they laugh, if they have forgiven. Because if somebody is harboring that unforgiveness in their heart, it shows in everything. And all of a sudden, whenever forgiveness is given, and there's some really tough situations where forgiveness, is very hard to forgive. However, I'm going to say this: God made a very big deal out of forgiveness. He put his son on the cross, like what we were talking about, put his son on the cross for it, shed the blood of his only son right there on the cross for every single one of us. So if God made a big deal out of it, I think we should make a big deal out of it too. But I know that every one of us wants a skip in our step. We want joy in our heart.
Absolutely. You know, we have to take the time to forgive. It's not a quick fix. Sometimes it's a process, and you might be going through a while where you're still upset about it, and spend time with God in that place. Also, the person you may need to forgive could even be gone or absent or dead. Maybe you never knew who your father was, or maybe they're gone. They've already died. You can still forgive them, because if you're holding on to that, it affects you. And I think that if you have one good memory of the person, one good time, you can put that as the place that you hold on to in your heart. And whenever they come to mind, whenever they come to your heart, you say, no, I remember when we went to Kings Island and ate a coney dog, or whatever that is, and hold on to the one good thing. Sometimes you don't have the one good thing, but if you do, hold on to that. And hold on to that cross, because God understands forgiveness.
That's right. And go to that one trusted friend. If you have that trusted friend, and just let them hear it. Because sometimes saying it out loud, and then just validating that, yes, I know that hurt you. I know that must have hurt you. Just getting it out.
Yes.
Sometimes begins the process of getting through it.
Well, and a practical tip is to write it out. I spent 3 days on my couch once in my early 20s and wrote an entire journal out. But once you have it on paper, that's very healing. You can take it to your paper shredder. You can take it to a coffee can and bury it in your backyard. You can burn it in a bonfire, and then you can mark the date and say, on this day, I forgave. And then that way, when the enemy comes against you in your mind and says, hey, you never forgave so and so, you can say, oh, no, yes, I did. It's in the shredder. And I remember the day that I let it go, because it's going to come. It might just come back to your mind again. And you'll have to say, oh, no, devil, I forgave that. And I'm standing with my forgiveness on that.
That's exactly right. No matter what it was. Jennifer, I want to say one more thing, though, before we leave. What about when people need to forgive themselves?
Oh, yes, of course. We always do. God loves you so much that you can love yourself. And I would start right there, because once you do that, it's not selfish. It's loving yourself enough that you can love others. And because he died for you and he cares about you. And that's that first vertical piece, that there is nothing you have done that he cannot forgive. And so list it out, confess it before him, and he'll clean it right up.
That's good. It's good to hear. It's good to know. And speaking of know, I know that I had one of your books, and it was a Christmas book. You probably have it there. Will you hold that up? Because I was reading this. Yes, A Christmas Heart. I was reading this on a plane whenever I was coming in one day, and whenever I started it, I wanted to finish it. And I was on a long flight, and I just read the whole thing from the time I sat down. And typically I don't do that, but I will tell you that even when the wheels hit the ground, you're on the plane about 15 or 20 minutes before you get off, I'm reading it because I wanted to finish every word. It was so good.
Thank you.
I know you've written several books. Will you show some of them? Let me just let them see them.
So I also have an Easter heart and a Christmas heart. So those are 2 devotionals, and you can do those with your friends. And then I wrote a book, Simply Joy, Rain or Shine. So through the hard times, through the good times, God has an umbrella of joy over your life, which you live out really well, Tammy, and he wants more joy for you.
Thank you. I know that they can find you in a lot of places, but I want you to tell them how they can hear you and how they can find you online. How can they hear you?
Well, you can go to jennifer-jackson.org, and all the previous episodes are on there, but also on all the major platforms, Spotify, Apple, Simply for Women with Jennifer Jackson.
Yes. And you are going to enjoy listening to her, because she is not only a wise woman, she is the friend that everybody wants to have. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being with me today. Thank you for what you share, not only your life, but you share so many things that make a difference to so many people. So I'm going to tip my coffee cup at you now until we meet again, my friend.
Thanks, Tammy.